Night of the Living Dummy. Goosebumps number 7 by R.L. Stine. Chapter 3. Who was that on the phone? Mr. Powell asked, shoveling another forkful of spaghetti into his mouth. Lindy slipped back into her place at the table. It was Miss Marshall down the block. Does she want you to babysit? Miss Powell asked, reaching for the salad bowl. She turned to Chris. Don't you want any salad? Chris wiped spaghetti sauce off her chin with her napkin. Maybe later. No, Lindy answered. She wants me to perform at Amy's birthday party with Slappy. Your first job, Mr. Powell said, a smile crossing his slender face. Amy and Ben liked Slappy so much that they insisted on him, Lindy said. Miss Marshall's going to pay me $20. That's great, their mother exclaimed. She passed the salad bowl across the table to her husband. It had been weeks since Lindy rescued Slappy from the trash dumpster. Every day after school, she had spent hours in her room rehearsing with him, working on his voice, practicing not moving her lips, thinking up jokes to perform with him. Chris kept insisting the whole thing was dumb. I can't believe you're being such a nerd, she told her sister. She refused to be an audience for Lindy's routines. But when Lindy brought Slappy into school on Friday, Chris's attitude began to change. A group of kids had gathered around Lindy outside her locker. As Lindy made Slappy talk for them, Chris watched from down the hall. She's going to make a total fool of herself, Chris thought. But to her surprise, the kids hooted and howled. They thought Slappy was a riot. Even Robbie Martin, the guy Chris had a crush on for 2 years, thought Lindy was terrific. Watching Robbie laugh along with the other kids made Chris think hard. Becoming a ventriloquist might be fun. And profitable. Lindy was going to earn $20 at the Marshall's birthday party. And word got around. She probably performed at a lot of parties and earned even more money. After dinner that evening, Lindy and Chris washed and dried the dishes. Then Lindy asked her parents if she could practice her new comedy routine on them. She hurried up to her room to get Slappy. Mr. and Mrs. Powell took a seat on the living room couch. Maybe Lindy will be a TV star, Miss Powell said. Maybe, Mr. Powell agreed, settling back on the couch, a pleased smile on his face. Barky yapped and climbed between Mr. and Mrs. Powell, his tiny stub of a tail wagging furiously. You know you're not allowed on the couch, Miss Powell said, sighing, but she made no move to push Barky off. Chris sat down away from the others on the floor by the steps, cradling her chin in her hands. You're looking glum this evening, her father remarked. Can I get a dummy too? Chris asked. She hadn't really planned to say it. The question just popped out of her mouth. Lindy came back into the room, carrying Slappy around the waist. Ready? She asked. She pulled the dining room chair into the center of the living room and sat down on it. Well, can I? Chris repeated. You really want one too? Miss Powell asked, surprised. Want what? Lindsay asked, confused. Chris said she wants a dummy too, Miss Powell reported. No way, Lindy said heatedly. Why do you want to be such a copycat? It looks like fun, Chris replied, her cheeks turning bright pink. If you can do it, I can do it too, she added shrilly. You always copy everything I do, Lindy protested angrily. Why don't you find something of your own for once? Go upstairs and work on your junk jewelry collection. That's your hobby. Let me be the ventriloquist. Girls, Mr. Powell started, raising a hand for quiet. Please don't fight over a dummy. I'd really think I'd be better at it, Chris said. I mean, Lindy isn't very funny. Everyone thinks I'm funny, Lindy insisted. That's not very nice, Chris, Miss Powell scolded. Well, I just think if Lindy has one, I should be able to have one too, Chris said to her parents. Copycat, Lindy repeated, shaking her head. You've been putting me down all week. You said it was nerdy, but I know why you changed your mind. You're upset because I'm going to earn some money and you're not. I really wish you two wouldn't argue about everything. I really wish you two wouldn't argue about everything, Mr. Powell said disgustedly. Well, can I have a dummy? Chris asked him. They're expensive, Mr. Powell replied, glancing at his wife. A good one will cost more than $100. I really don't think we can afford to buy one now. Why don't you both share Slappy? Miss Powell suggested. Huh? Lindy's mouth dropped open in protest. You two always share everything, Miss Powell continued, so why don't you share Slappy? But Mom, Lindy whined unhappily. Excellent idea, Mr. Powell interrupted. He motioned to Chris. Try it out. After you share him for a while, I'm sure one of you will lose interest in him. Maybe even both of you. Chris climbed to her feet and walked over to Lindy. She reached out for the dummy. I don't mind sharing, she said quietly, searching her sister's eyes for approval of the idea. Can I hold him just for a second? Lindy held on to Slappy tightly. Suddenly, the dummy's head tilted back and his mouth opened wide. Beat it, Chris, he snarled in a harsh, raspy voice. Get lost, you stupid moron. Before Chris could back away, Slappy's wooden hand shot up and he slapped her across the face. Chapter 4. Ow! Chris screamed and raised her hand to her cheek, which was bright pink. She stepped back. Stop it, Lindy, that hurt. Me, Lindy cried. I didn't do it, Slappy did. Don't be dumb, Chris protested, rubbing her cheek. You really hurt me. But I didn't do it, Lindy cried. She turned Slappy's face toward her. Why were you so rude to Chris? Why were you so rude to Chris? Miss Powell jumped up from the couch. Stop acting dumb and apologize to your sister, he ordered. Mr. Powell jumped up from the couch. Stop acting dumb and apologize to your sister, he ordered. Lindy bowed Slappy's head. I'm sorry, she made the dummy say. No, in your own voice, Mr. Powell insisted, crossing his arms in front of his chest. Slappy didn't hurt Chris. You did. Okay, Lindy muttered, blushing. She avoided Chris's angry stare. I'm sorry. Here. She dumped Slappy into Chris's arms. Chris was so surprised she nearly dropped the dummy. Slappy was heavier than she'd imagined. Now what am I supposed to do with him? Chris asked Lindy. Lindy shrugged and crossed the room to the couch, where she dropped down beside her mother. Why did you make such a fuss? Miss Powell whispered, leaning close to Lindy. That was so babyish. Lindy blushed. Slappy is mine. Why can't something be mine for once? Sometimes you girls are so nice to each other, and sometimes Miss Powell's voice trailed off. Mr. Powell took a seat on the padded arm of the chair across the room. How do I make his mouth work? Chris asked, tilting the dummy upside down to examine its back. There's a string in his back inside the slit of his jacket, Lindy told her, grudgingly. You just pull it. I don't want Chris to work Slappy, Lindy thought unhappily. I don't want to share Slappy. Why can't I have something that just belongs to me? Why do I have to share everything with her? Why does Chris always want to copy me? She gritted her teeth and waited for her anger to fade. Later that night, Chris sat straight up in bed. She had a bad dream. I was being chased, she remembered, her heart still pounding. Chased by what? By whom? She couldn't remember. She glanced around the shadowy room, waiting for her heartbeat to return to normal. The room felt hot and stuffy, even though the window was open and the curtains were fluttering. Lindy lay sound asleep on her side, in the twin bed next to Chris. She was snoring softly, her lips slightly parted, her long hair falling loose about her face. Chris glanced at the clock radio on the bed table between the two twin beds. It was nearly 3 a.m. Even though now she was wide awake, the nightmare wouldn't completely fade away. She still felt uncomfortable, a little frightened, as if she were still being chased by someone or something. The back of her neck felt hot and prickly. She turned and fluffed her pillow, propping it higher on the headboard. As she lay back on it, something caught her eye. Someone sitting in the chair in front of the bedroom window. Someone staring at her. After a sharp intake of breath, she realized it was Slappy. Yellow moonlight poured over him, making his strange eyes glow. He was sitting up in the chair, tilted to the right at a slight angle, one arm resting on the slender arm of the chair. His mouth locked in a wide, mocking grin. His eyes seemed to be staring right at Chris. Chris stared back, studying the dummy's expression in the eerie yellow moonlight. Then, without thinking, without even realizing what she was doing, she climbed silently out of bed. Her foot got tangled in the bed sheet and she nearly tripped. Kicking the sheet away, she made her way quickly across the room to the window. Slappy stared up at her as her shadow fell over him. His grin seemed to grow wider as Chris leaned closer. A gust of wind made the soft curtains flutter against her face. Chris pushed them away and peered down at the dummy's painted hand. She reached a hand out and rubbed his wooden hair, shining in the moonlight. His head felt warm, warmer than she'd imagined. Chris quickly jerked her hand away. What was that sound? Had Slappy snickered? Had he laughed at her? No, of course not. Chris realized she was breathing hard. Why am I so freaked out by this stupid dummy? She thought. In the bed behind her, Lindy made a gurgling sound and rolled onto her back. Chris stared hard into Slappy's big eyes, gleaming in the light from the window. She waited for him to blink or to roll his eyes from side to side. She suddenly felt foolish. He's just a stupid wooden dummy, she told herself. She reached out and pushed him over. The stiff body swung to the side. A hard head made a soft clunk as it hit the wooden arm of the chair. Chris stared down at him, feeling strangely satisfied, as if she'd somehow taught him a lesson. The curtains rustled against her face again. She pulled them away, feeling sleepy. She started back to bed. She had only gone one step when Slappy reached up and grabbed her wrist. Chapter 5. Oh! As the hand tightened around her wrist, Chris cried out and spun around. To her surprise, Lindy was crouched beside her. Lindy had a tight grip on Chris's wrist. Chris jerked her hand from Lindy's grasp. Moonlight through the window lit up Lindy's devilish grin. Gotcha again, she declared. You didn't scare me, Chris insisted, but her voice came out, a trembling whisper. You jumped a mile, Lindy exclaimed gleefully. You really thought the dummy grabbed you? Did not, Chris replied. She hurried to her bed. What were you doing up anyway? Lindy demanded. Were you messing with Slappy? No, I had a bad dream, Chris told her. I just went to look out the window. Lindy snickered. You should have seen the look on your face. I'm going back to sleep. Leave me alone, Chris snapped. She pulled the covers up to her chin. Lindy pushed the dummy back to its sitting position. Then she returned to her bed, still chuckling over the scare she'd given her sister. Chris rearranged her pillows, then glanced across the room to the window. The dummy's face was half covered in shadow now, but the eyes glowed as if he were alive. And then they stared into hers as if they were trying to tell her something. Why does he have a grin like that? Chris asked herself, trying to rub away the prickling feeling on the back of her neck. She pulled up the sheets, settling into the bed, and turned on her side, away from the wide staring eyes. But even with her back turned, she could feel them gazing at her. Even with her eyes closed and the covers pulled up to her head, she could picture the shadowy, distorted grin, the unblinking eyes staring at her. Staring. She drifted into an uncomfortable sleep, drifted into another dark nightmare. Someone was chasing her. Someone very evil was chasing her. But who? On Monday afternoon, Lindy and Chris both stayed after school to rehearse for the spring concert. It was nearly 5 when they arrived home, and they were surprised to see their dad's car in the driveway. "You're home so early," Chris exclaimed, finding him in the kitchen helping their mother prepare dinner. "I'm leaving tomorrow for a sales conference in Portland," Mr. Powell explained, peeling an orange over the sink with a small paring knife. "So I only worked half a day today." "What's for dinner?" Lindy asked. "Meatloaf," Miss Powell replied, "if your father ever gets the onion peeled." "There's a trick to not crying when you peel an onion," Mr. Powell said, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I wish I knew it." "How was chorus rehearsal?" Miss Powell asked, kneading a big ball of red ground beef in her hands. "Boring," Lindy complained, opening the refrigerator and taking out a can of Coke. "Yeah, we're doing all these Russian and Yugoslavian songs," Chris said. "They're so sad. They're all about sheep or something. We don't really know what they're about. There's no translation." Mr. Powell rushed to the sink and began splashing cold water on his red, runny eyes. "I can't take this," he wailed. He tossed the half-peeled onion back to his wife. "Crybaby," she muttered, shaking her head. Chris headed up the stairs to drop her backpack in her room. She tossed it onto the desk she shared with Lindy, then turned to go back downstairs, but something by the window caught her eye. Spinning around, she gasped. "Oh no!" The startled cry escaped her lips. Chris raised her hand to her cheek and stared in disbelief. Slappy was propped up in the chair in front of the window, grinning at her with his usual wide-eyed stare. And seated behind him was another dummy, also grinning at her, and they were holding hands. "What's going on here?" Chris cried aloud.